Just trying to get this. There we go.
Do you know how to like start the Spanish channel? I don't know if you want to test it right now to, to toggle between English and Spanish.
Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, and I have the honor and privilege of being your local council representative in Northwest Denver. Do I need to turn it up a little bit? All right, let's turn up the mic because I don't want to do that. Okay. So thank you for joining us. For those of you, can I just have a show of hands of who lives in Northwest Denver? Okay, a good showing. Yeah, us too. So thank you all for coming out. For those of you, how did you hear about this? Did you get a mailer? Who lives close by and got a mailer?
Got a mailer with the wrong.
Yeah, sorry about that. We can explain something about that with the mailer with the wrong address. Community and Planning and Development did that, and it was not intentional. So just want to say that thank you for all for joining us. We have a whole entire presentation, and I want to just pass the mic real quick, but I just want to give a shout out. Thank you to our police department for being here, and thank you for partnering with us. Appreciate that. And then we have lots of different people in the room. We have someone from the mayor's office, Dominic. We have Joshua. Sorry, I'm not doing last names. We have Victoria Aguilar. We have Drew. And
I'm Dana with CBD.
Dave. And then I'll pass the mic to my colleague, Councilwoman Gonzalez Gutierrez. We'll set the ground rules. We'll have Drew. We have a facilitator tonight. We'll have ample opportunity to have Q&A. But thank you most importantly for coming out, and this is what democracy looks like, is having you all to attend and be able to give us feedback on what we're doing in the city. And does everyone know what we're here for? Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. My name is Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, and I am one of your 3 council members. So if you live in the city and county of Denver, I'm one of the council members at large. And so I also represent everybody in Denver. And one of my colleagues will also be joining us. She's on her way. Her name is Sarah Parody. She's the other councilwoman at large. So I just wanted to real quick introduce her because she will be stepping in here in a few minutes. And with that, we will pass it over to Drew, who is going to be facilitating today.
Thanks, everybody. So just want to cover some ground rules for today. And yes, we do have an interpreter in the back here. So if we need anybody to have that interpretation, just raise your hand and we'll get that covered. Yes, we got someone there. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tenemos interpretación disponible. Si alguien necesita interpretación en español, puede levantar su mano. Sí, gracias.
Thank you. All right, so wanted to cover some ground rules today. We already did some introductions with everybody here, our speakers. You're going to get to hear from them a lot. But I'd like to cover just some norms for to make sure that this is a safe and respectful space for everybody so we can hear each other. So first one is I'd like you all to think about listening to understand, set your intention there. Be courteous and respectful. I'd like you to practice assuming positive intent first. And then also would love for you to be open to learning something new. And that was supposed to say treat each other with kindness. But you can fill in the blank there, treat each other with whatever positive words you'd like. And then we would really not like to see any yelling or harassment today. That will not be tolerated. So we're going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement.
Okay, vamos a empezar.
So we normally take a moment to have acknowledgement of the land that we are on. The city and county of Denver honors and acknowledges the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor our elders, past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous people. La ciudad y el condado de Denver honran y reconocen que la tierra en la que residimos es el territorio tradicional de los pueblos indígenas Ute, Cheyenne y Arapaho. También reconocemos las 48 naciones tribales contemporáneas que están históricamente ligadas a estas tierras que conforman el estado de Colorado. Honramos a los ancianos pasados, presentes y futuros, y aquellos que han administrado esta tierra a lo largo de las generaciones. También reconocemos que las instituciones gubernamentales, académicos y culturales se fundaron y continúan promulgando exclusiones y eliminaciones de los pueblos indígenas.
Thank you very much. Okay, so our question and answer process, some of you have grabbed some sticky notes and Sharpies already. They're on the back table, or the table at the entrance back there. We are a little bit limited on notes and Sharpies, so I'd love for you to share with each other if possible.
No sé si quieren
no-
compartir una con el otro.
They would love for you to write down your questions
So,
on
no,
a sticky note. We are gonna, I specifically, I'll come around and collect those from you. We're going to focus on questions that are really following the topic of today's meeting. And then if we have time to get to questions that are outside of that topic, we can do so at the end. But want to make sure everybody has a fair chance to get their question answered. So please, if you do have one as you're listening to the presentation, go ahead and write that down on a sticky note. I will come by and grab those from you, and then we'll have a process to read those aloud. Each person will get a 2-minute response maximum. And then I'm going to be holding on to the microphone as well. So I'll just come around and hold out the microphone for you to speak. And then we'll have responses from our speakers up here. So that is the Q&A process. Again, there are more sticky notes and Sharpies in the back, but there should be others floating around amongst the crowd here. So please share with each other so that you can get your questions answered. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our presentation.
Back. All right, so I'm gonna go over kind of the current state of affairs with our newcomer program. As Council President mentioned, my name is Victoria Aguilar. I serve as our newcomer deputy director for the city of Denver. I was born and raised 2 blocks from here, so I'm from this neighborhood as well. It's good to see some familiar faces here. But yeah, let's just hop right into it. So we have served 43,000 people that have arrived from the southern border since December 2022. We know that roughly half of that number has moved on to other locations. At the height of our response, we did have 10 facilities and locations that were housing newcomers. As you may all have seen, it has slowed down significantly since December. And we'll go over some numbers in just a little bit to give you a picture of how much it has slowed down. Has closed our last short-term newcomer shelter as of October 2nd. So we did close our reception site, our onward travel, and our short-term sheltering as of October 2nd. So here's kind of a year-over-year comparison that we wanted to show today is in October of 2023, there were 5,000 new arrivals and about 3,000 people in shelter on any given night. This year, October 2024, we've had 4 arrivals. 0 people are currently in our newcomer shelter system, obviously because it is closed down. We've had about 500 arrivals in all of our summer in 2024, which is pretty much on par with normal patterns of migration. So we have not received any buses from Texas since early June. That's what we call uncoordinated travel. And so we have not received any since June.
Nada desde junio.
What has changed and why the change in numbers? The Biden administration had policy change on border crossings earlier this year. In September, normally, which is a high month for migration and immigration, we saw a 75% year-over-year drop in crossings overall, and that remains consistent today. So border crossings are currently at the 2020 levels.
Niveles de
And our
cruces.
current policy, or one similar in strength, is expected to remain in place regardless of the election outcome. So I know that was kind of a question that a lot of people had last time, if we expect to see any change, you know, with the election, either way that it goes, we don't expect to see much change. We've also had some increased enforcement from our partners in Mexico. And obviously change in number of programs. So we're focused more on long-term support rather than the short-term shelter type of situation that we were in a crisis during the onset of this response. And I'll hand it over to Joshua.
Palabra a Joshua.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Hello, folks. My name is Joshua Posner. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives in the Mayor's Office. I'm here to talk in a little bit more specific about the Remington site, some of the strategy behind our thinking on this property, and some of the expected outcomes by way of programming. So the very first point, and something we want to level set and make sure we're clear on community on, is that we really look to pursue this site as a potential opportunity out of an abundance of caution. The Remington Cafetorium, which you're sitting in right now, as well as the gym on the other side of the building, as well as some office auxiliary space, would be used in a potential emergency as a potential newcomer reception and shelter operation. The city is not planning to lease or exploring a lease for the entire building. As we mentioned, the only circumstance where we look to activate this site as a shelter for newcomers is in the scenario where we have emergency buses. And what we mean by that, as Victoria alluded to, are those TDM buses that we have not seen since June. And so to level set, our expectations are very low that we would expect to see those buses return. But out of an abundance of caution, out of a responsibility to our citizens, prepared for emergency scenarios, wanted to explore opportunities that may allow us to manage the surge in an appropriate way. The site would be staffed at all times, either DPS staff or CCD, and CCD staff will be staffed on site at the property at all times during the day. As the city is not pursuing a potential lease of the entire building, the space in the building that's not being activated by the city will still have DPS staff on site conducting other business. And then this City County of Denver will be responsible for security on site in the evening times if the building is under a lease with the city, and then we'll have security on site 24 hours if it is activated for a shelter. We'll touch on this in a moment, but the max occupancy we expect of this building is about 100 people with an emergency waiver. In terms of the terms of this lease is not official. It has not been filed by the city. Pursued by city council yet. So a lot of these terms are simply projections and our best guess in terms of what we are negotiating at this point. The first point, lease is going to be 1-year term. In that scenario, any extension that the city would look to pursue would have to go back to council for review in that process. And then the lease itself is a lease in structure only. There's no cost for the city to pursue a lease here. What we as the city would be required to do and pay for are the operating costs of the site, as well as a potential hold on the site for potential damages. You can think of this as like a security deposit of sorts for the city to potentially space. So what if there's not a surge? We are looking at all sorts of contingencies or plans to either partner with DPS to activate this space on our own. Again, these are things that we are simply ideating on as we look to pursue a lease with Denver Public Schools. So one of the biggest things we thought about to this point is potentially to activate the space as a youth programming opportunity. Again, we have to put that in the terms of the lease, and we would have to evaluate the programs necessary to do that. If we do look to activate programs for youth in this space, Community engagement will be a critical part of that process, and I know that we can partner with President Sandoval's office, the mayor's office, the Office of Children's Affairs, to have that community engagement process and understand what are the best opportunities to activate this space in service to the community that surrounds it.
Y en las mejores oportunidades para
So
crear
in
ese
terms of this specific meeting, this is a community information meeting as required by the Denver zoning code as we look to pursue a potential zoning use permit. And so you can kind of see here the different zoning codes and zone district that the city this property is in within the city. There are many different uses and zone districts, as you can see on this map. And while the area is really mixed, we know that there's certainly residential to the west and more industrial to the east of this property. And that's part of the interest that we've had in exploring this space as a potential shelter and reception site is just based on kind of the mixed aspects of this community.
Los aspectos.
And so the residential type 2, residential care use type 2 is kind of the permit that we are pursuing here. During the emergencies that threaten public health and safety, that's when we can kind of look to activate this as an emergency shelter. We have a zone by right, which means this property, as it's currently zoned, can, in an emergency, shelter 20 individuals. As it currently stands in its current zoning. In a heightened emergency scenario where we have buses that exceed that number of 20 individuals, the city does have an opportunity to write a letter to CPD, the zoning department, and request an expansion of that capacity, which is something that we would plan to do operationally if we do look to activate this space from an emergency shelter perspective. Again, if we would just go ahead and write that letter, that in and of itself does not necessitate this meeting, but because we are pursuing a zoning use permit for this space, we wanted to ensure that we did this properly by the book, had a meeting, a conversation with community to hear questions and continue to engage in this discussion. You can see there that everything kind of complies with our zoning process. As we touched on initially, our capacity, again, we're expecting about 100 individuals. Families in a potential shelter scenario would be separate from individuals. That's why we have the two spaces, both the cafeteria here and the gymnasium. I don't know which one would be which for families or individuals, but we would separate those communities potentially as needed. Guests would be allowed to bring certain personal items of reasonable size and scope. Weapons certainly would not be of reasonable size and scope and would not be allowed into the facility. We'd also have restroom access for folks. We would have security, again, on-site 24 hours as well as 24-hour staffing. And then 3 meals a day would be provided.
Y también se le proporcionarían 3.
We'll have Victoria quickly share some contact information and then we'll circle back and start.
Y rápido les comparten información de contacto y puedes
Contact information.